Here's the carburetor from the motorcycle. O-ring here on the valve side going towards the engine. 2 fuel lines. This is the choke that is open. I should say that is open. That's closed choke, a little hard to see. There's a screen here, a little worse for the wear. I'm not sure that's going to go back. The big problem with this particular carburetor that I've seen so far, it looks generally in very good shape, but this is a piston style motorcycle carburetor, not like the British carburetors. This top has a huge break in the casting here, a big chunk out of it. Now, I don't know that that's going to make a difference. This cap still threads on. That is below the Venturi, even wide open. I don't know that's going to make a difference. I bought another casting top and bottom piece from eBay used. It's in pretty rough shape. It's pretty corroded, but it is intact up here. I'm going to see what the inside of this one looks like. And then we will make a decision at that point in time. So let's work on getting this apart. I'm going to throw everything in a tray over here. Throw it all in some carburetor cleaner. This has, I think, an adjuster right here. If it turns, I think you can see threads right there to fine-tune your... Let's see what we can do. I'm assuming all these are JIS screws and not Phillips, even though they look like Phillips. So I have my JIS screwdrivers over here. We'll give that a go and see if that holds them. See how well this comes apart. Got 4 case screws. Looks like maybe a 4mm, not sure. Let's get this apart. Let's see what the inside looks like. Lots of pretty dry actually, pretty smooth. The dry sort of brushes right off. That looks cleaner, much cleaner than the used one I got. We have more to go, but that looks pretty good. I'm not... This is all sort of cheap pot metal, so this pin needs to push out. The pin holding the float needs to push out of this sort of cheap pot metal. So we will see what we can do with that. Everything is fragile, fragile, fragile. Let's take some needles out. Piston slid out nicely. It's the main needle. Looks like it's a little compressed, like this side is folded in a little. I don't know if you can tell that groove that the throttle cable drops into. It looks like it's a little bit compressed here. There is this sort of retaining clip that holds that needle in place. That's about it. Really looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Let's keep going. We're gonna have to be very careful with a lot of this. Let me get a, oh, I'm gonna push that out with, I wanna be real careful to push that float pin out, and that is not gonna do it. Let me see if I can find something. Okay, I've got an assortment of sort of blunt and less than blunt pusher type picks. First thing, let's get this O-ring, which is hard as a rock, but should come out. This is actually not a sharp enough O-ring for this. There we go. So no bad O-ring. All that looks good except for corrosion. Now our big one is this float bowl pin or float pin. I don't know what it may do. I might have moved it a little. We ought to put a little lubrication on that. Let's do that. All right, I don't have my needle oiler. Big Croyle can, bigger than I want, using a lot more than I need, but that's okay. In this instance, you can't have enough. Let's see if we can. All right, the float moves. That's good. The needle is, the pin is not. I'd rather push gently. Let me try. I have a little ball socket hex that I have a handle on the back of. I can put in the palm of my hands. So try to get a little motion, and that is just not moving. I'm reluctant to put this in a vise and go tap, 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 but that might be what we end up doing to get it sort of moving. These pins, though, look very fragile, and I don't know if it's stuck in one or both, and I'm worried about breaking one off, so I'm going to have to be real careful. But I'd rather clamp it in a vise than try to freehand that if I'm going to do it, and give it a little tap. Let me go over to the vise. I will it'll get at least a grip on it, and then I will I'll get you back. Let's take this gasket out. clean, actually. I think it's rubber. I don't think it's actually some kind of paper. I think it's a rubber gasket, like the rubber O-ring. It came out pretty nicely. Got the vise, got the soft jaws. Even with the soft jaws, it started to roll this way on me. So I've got a piece of soft wood in here that catches both sides of the carburetor frame. So it's in here pretty good. I'm not gonna wail on this, so I think we're okay. I put it with the side with the nub that is sticking out. This is a little proud. That pin's a little proud, and I'd rather work on that side. So what we're gonna do is just that moved right away, like that. That is now flush right there. So now I've got a super fine, I don't know what this is, like a T2 or torque something driver I got. I am gonna, oh, that went way in. That is just, that I've driven all the way past this pin. I'm feeling very good about that. That really took almost no effort. I'm gonna take it out of here and I'll show you what we have. There's my block of wood. So you can see we have moved that far. Really great. It does not move by hand yet, but it moves really far. Let's see if we can get any just hand movement. Yeah, so we can move it a little. Let's see if it'll go back. Just, oh yeah, it shot right back. Real good. So let's see if we can push it out this way. Yes. Now it's sort of slow, steady pressure. All right. So we're moving nicely. Pretty good. I'd rather press it out with this than grab it and burr it up. So I'm going to move back over to my clean space. All right, we're back. I'm going to use some more coil on these pins and work them back and forth a little more. The more the better. I am using this super tiny Torx and just hand pushing. It went right in it, like no effort. So that was great. All right. I was just with my thumb that time. So I sort of like it when I might need more friction in the end once I set this, but that's really great. Let's go the other way. All right, I think that my driver is getting too fat. So let's use something thinner. Yep. Yep. Okay, now we can, there we go, all the way out. All the way out. Let's lift this. So for design purposes, it has just a flat tab right here. No spring was here. I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be. Pin top of the needle almost looks upside down, really. Looks a bit like an upside down needle. Sort of funny. See if that'll come out. It fell right out. Okay, so now here's the quick what's up and what's down. Well, it's barely perceptible, but this side, if it will focus, is essentially a pin, and the other side is actually, I'll put a fat thumb out of the way, is actually what you traditionally think of as a needle. Wow, that is very subtle. There you go. Okay. Now we've got 1, 2, 3. I assume these are going to thread out of there, or are intended to thread out of there. Let's put a little coil in this, give them a fighting chance. We are going to be, like I said, be hard pressed to put too much of this in there. So those 3, that's really about it. This screen, I think, is a press fit. We'll have to figure out how to hook that out of there. There is no nut on this choke. There is no circlip. It looks like some sort of epoxy or brazing. It feels more metal than, so that is somehow bonded or fused on, so that is not coming off, and I am not pulling it off. Looks like they've got a split washer, maybe for tension. There is a rivet here, peened over. I am not drilling that. So we're going to try to pull this spring ring out. I don't know how to do that. Get it behind it and hook it. This screen looks to be independent of the ring. Let's see. Almost like Windows screen, really. It is. Not really affixed. There's a ring there. It is affixed here. It's right here. There's a fixing point, like a little metal tab. I don't know if you can see that right there. It must catch a couple of wires from the screen. I do not see that anywhere else. Maybe here. Looks like here as well. Once I get that popped out, I will, I think this ring is a friction fit, and I will be able to hook it out of there. Maybe it's one of those ones where I can do that is in fact how it came out. Now that it's out, let's take a look at it. So it is just a friction fit. I don't see any evidence of how that screen attaches, but it sure is attached. I'm not sure. With a good air filter, I'm not sure I'm going to put this back on. That looks like where it's attaching. I don't know if you can see that, but maybe it's brazed. Just one little wire brazed on right there. I don't know. Yeah, it looks like maybe it's brazed on right there. A little chunk of brazing. I think this screen is not going back on. That is my general assessment. Gotta get that nut off. That's easy. Get these. Let me find the right screwdrivers, and I'll be back. All right, we're going to give one of these a try. I have a fairly small screwdriver. It seems to really rock in there nicely, and that just turned right away. It took no effort. So that is what I don't know if that threads inside there. It looks like it could. We'll clean it up first and then see how it looks. That, I don't know if that seat down in there that is held in right there, I don't know if that comes out, and I'm not really going to try it. This one is our next one. Turned right out. nice and clean. Nice. Tiny little holes, almost hard to see. Lots of dirt as always. Clean all that up. Now this one I got to get a hex, but I'm optimistic given how well everything else is turned. Need a hex for that one. That one I need a small socket, 6-point I'd like. Let's look at the float bowl. So the float bowl, I've got this looks like a drain. This looks like a carburetor drain to me. Let's go ahead and see if that comes out. That's a little sloppy. Let me try a bigger one. That's good. Turned right out. Nice and clean. Lots of dirt. Lots of dirt. All right, now we've got, this is the fuel shutoff. On reserve. So it's a reserve. Let's see, on. I guess that's reserve and stop. I don't know if you can see that. On, reserve, and then that up there says stop. So all the way over is on. There is a positive stop point right here on the cam. There is also a positive stop point right here at stop, and so I would assume reserve is here, and maybe it picks up the lower pickup tube. So you get, you know, it's only a 1-gallon gas tank. You're not much left when you're talking about reserve. You're talking about cups of water. Let's try this JIS. That is turning really nicely. Very pleased with all this. Let's try this one. All right, 2 little machine screws. There's our plate. Here is our... Okay, so there's a spring washer, typical, sort of on top of it. There's your selector dial, and then we have a sort of a multi-baffle rubber. Looks like tons of holes. Let's see what we get. Looks like it indexes on a couple of them. Here we go. There we go. Yeah, so it's got a pin, one proud pin here. The rest are, oh, that one's a slight bump right. Oh, that's a pin too. Let me see if I can get you dimensions. There you go. So you got a pin and a pin, 2 pins. That's smooth. That's smooth. 1 orifice, 2 orifice, 3 orifice. So one must come in from here, and then go out to there. Let's look at the back of this. So the back of this is a, see if you can get dimensions. So it's a, that's how open it is. So you're going to capture 2 of those holes, right? So that's what we said. That's off. It's going to block them all. All the way over is on. So on would pick up, it would join your top inlet from this feed tube, this fuel supply tube, and then it would return fuel into the carburetor this way. And then if you went to reserve, which would be sort of this angle, you would be drawing fuel through this lower feed tube here and then into the carburetor that way. That's it. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Now, it must flow into this chamber because there's no carb holes, no body holes. There's that drain that I told you about. Yeah, that is definitely a drain. It's just a drain. It would be nice if they would have used it. So let's see what we have in here. It turned also very nicely. Pretty pleased with this carburetor so far. A lot more dirt, dry dirt. That's kind of a coarse thread. That's a little bit funny. I don't know if you can see that. There seems to be an O-ring on it. And then I have a stamped steel plate here. There we go. All right, let's deal with the plate first. This is more like a dish. It's got a lot of dirt, just dirt. No rust. Looks like rust, but it's all dirt. It's just sort of a fuel collector. Oh, it's a screen. Okay. So we've got a screen. This is a fuel filter, fuel screen. So that's like a little fuel bowl. Let me get it back over here. So it's kind of like a little fuel bowl, a little reservoir. So the fuel must come in through this hole. I don't see, there's an opening on the bottom of this tube right here. That's a dead ender. Now let's see if we can get that screen out of there. So that screen has a, I don't know. I have a carburetor rebuild. Oops. Couldn't do that again if I wanted to. Another little O-ring. Sort of a flattish profile. I don't know if that's supposed to be like that. Now we are just have this screen. There's a little tab to get under here. I do not have the right apparatus for this. There we go. And that's out. So inside here we have dirt, dry dirt. Disgusting. All right. So there's got to be some more inlet holes. I have the hole in the center that screw is going to fill, and then I have a hole here so water can get in here and go through this screen. But where it goes after that, got me. You got me. I do not know how that flows. We'll try to figure that out as we clean it up. Let's look at the screen. Just a brass or copper screen, fine mesh, brass framer on the outside, brass framer on the inside, a little lifting tab. It's a little hard to see that. That's what I was hooking under. I guess if you had little pliers, you could have grabbed that. That will clean up if it's not in the kit. And this will all clean up. There is a hole here that goes down into our passage. That is a blank plug, non-removable plug. There's our hole. There it is right there. Can you see it? Right there. And that goes in this cast tube, which is plugged, and up here into the float bowl. It doesn't, oh no, it doesn't go in the float bowl. So that goes up into the top of the casting. Here's the top of the casting. That's the commensurate hole. And it must, from there, go across to this. Oh, I see. Here's our drilled hole. So it's drilled here at this angle. So it goes up through this over to our needle and seat and down. Clever. All right, so this is this outside of the screen is the dirty fuel side. It flows through, has to be full, goes across in that hole and up. All right, that's it. That's all the parts. It's pretty basic, except for getting this off. I'll do that in a second once I get a socket. Last one. Looks Looks like about 8 millimeter. I have also a 5/16. Seems a little bit more snug. 6-point. Just a nut driver. I'm not gonna get carried away. Everything else is turned out nicely, and that's all it took. So there you go. I was lucky. I consider myself lucky. This is, I could say it's Honda engineering, but there's our orifice, little rubber or red gasket. That's it. Still need this one. Yes, 10. In keeping with my good fortune, we'll go nut driver and see if 10 turns it. It does. Oops, whole stud came out. So either way, it's done. I'm not going to take the butterfly, the plate off of this choke rod. Since I can't get the rod out, I'm just going to clean it where it is, use a toothbrush, lots of scrubbing. It's a manual choke anyway, so it is human force. That's a heck of a long arm. It moves very smoothly now. I will lubricate it, but I am not going to go taking those screws out. That's asking for trouble. So this is the only part that is a little concerning. As I said, I think it's above the vacuum. May have a little vacuum leak around it. Maybe wrap it with Teflon tape. Who knows? There we go. Let's soak it for a while, ultrasonic, and we'll come back. All right, carburetor rebuild time. I have everything laid out here so that you can see it. This is the bottom half of the carburetor with all the original parts. This is the top half of the carburetor with all the original parts. These are the O-ring and this air filter screen or inlet screen. That's not going back in. And then these are the case screws, and these are the idle mixture screw and the air mixture screw. This is the carburetor kit I purchased. It's K&L CT90 Carb Repair Kit 182408. I will zoom in on this and we'll look at that. I'll do the top half, I'll do the bottom half, and we'll do them in a couple of different breaks. So we'll go from there. All right, the carburetor rebuild kit. You can see it right there, K&L 182408. This is the case gasket. That does not work. Here's the original case gasket. It is square externally. It has screws at the four corners. This is for a different CT90 carburetor. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to reuse my old one. If you saw my video where I took it apart, this is some sort of a rubber. It's actually still in really good condition. It is not brittle. It's still flexible. It's not dried up and it's not cracked. So I am going to reuse that. This is not on my existing carburetor. This, I think, is some version of a main jet for some version of a CT90. Then I get my main jet needle. I'm going to use this. This is the retaining clips that go with it. I'm going to use those. This is the O-ring for the fuel filter screen. This is the O-ring for the intake manifold. I'm going to use that. We have an air metering screw, an idle mixture screw. We have an idle jet. These all appear to match precisely, and they're new and clean. We have the float valve here, which is new. It has the needle in it. Interestingly, the needle on these now, for those who saw, hopefully that will focus. For those who saw, that may not be in focus. Before, it's a very sharp point on the end of one end of that. That's actually spring loaded. Let me see if I can actuate that so you can see it. Put it in front of a dark surface. I doubt this is going to focus, but this is spring loaded, this little tip. And that is what rides against the float. So I'm going to replace the needle and seat. It comes with a needle, it comes with a washer. It comes with a second washer, I guess for height adjustment, but in the manual, you adjust the height by bending the tab on the float. Then it comes with a series of O-rings, none of which go in this particular carburetor, either in the parts diagram or none of them came out of it, so none of these little O-rings are going to be used. So that is what I'm going to use from here. So we will bring those parts in as we do the different halves of the carburetor. All right, the top half of the carburetor. So we have the carburetor body. The float will be on the bottom. We have the throttle on the top. I have this enormous brake in my casting. I talked about it before. I think there will be a vacuum leak of some size. I may try to seal it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to see how it goes, and then I'll make a decision. I have another casting. I bought a used carburetor of eBay. It's pretty bad. And this one is in much better shape. I did not disassemble the choke butterfly. It seems to be operating fine. It has a spring-loaded bypass. And I'm leaving all of that alone. Idle mixture screw goes here, or idle speed, I suppose. Air mixture screw goes here. The float goes here. The needle valve for the float goes here. The main jet goes here. And the idle jet goes in here. I did press the main jet orifice out and cleaned it. I have pressed it back in. It's really not hard. I used this pencil, in fact, went from the other side and pressed it. It's a little brass thimble down in the bottom there. So let's go. Main jet goes in the middle. I'm reusing the old one. I have cleaned it with carb cleaner as best that I can. It just gets threaded in. Not much to it. You can use a screwdriver or a nut driver. I'm using a nut driver, just snug. The idle mixture jet, idle jet, slow speed jet goes right next to it. That is only a blade screw to tighten it up. These are brass. They don't require a lot of pressure. Actually, I'm going to redo that. I'm going to use the new one. So already first mistake in my build. I have a new slow speed jet. The old one. Here is the new one. Near as I can tell, they are virtually identical. The new one does have some numbering on it. Looks like 38. The old one has some embossment on it, but that to me looks like R40, A40, so maybe 38 and 40 are different. I'm going to try the new one. I tend to use the newer parts. I may be back in here and redoing this. We'll see. I'll save all the old parts in the event I have to get back in here and do this all over again. Needle and seat. I am using the new needle and seat. Here's the old one. Needle, seat, little fiber washer. Here's the new. There we go, it's turning. Just a little hard for me to get my fat fingers in there. Nut driver, hand tight. That's all I'm doing. New needle. Again, I talked about this double-ended. The cone is your valve. The spring is towards the float, so that has a little spring. I can feel it. By the way, I used one of the new washers. The float has a tab in the middle that presses on that spring. That will go in like this. Pin, for those who saw me take this apart, it slides much easier now. Now, there is our activity. So, the manual tells you that there is a height when it just touches the spring. Don't depress the spring, but when it just touches the spring, it should be 21 millimeters from the sealing surface, not this outer flange, the sealing surface to the float. So I can tell you it can't go much lower. So it's just touching the spring. It's not compressing the spring. There it is compressed the spring. So if I just touch it, we're going to take dial calipers. We can touch on the sealing surface, and then we can adjust till we're just touching the float. And that is 26 millimeters at that. So I did bend the tab. I did it off camera. I bent it pretty substantially. Actually, not that far, but it's very clear in the service manual. They talk about float level, adjusting the fuel level. They describe it. They make it very clear that the dimension is from the carburetor body, where the gasket sits, not the outer flange, and they measure it when it's just touching. In text, they describe when it's just touching, not compressing the spring of the needle, and that it should be 21 millimeters. So that's what I went with. This bike was not running. Someone had clearly monkeyed with the carburetor, so I'm going to do it that way. So now if it's just touching, and I go in the back and I set my 21 millimeters, I'm at 21 millimeters, and I just barely act like a couple of tenths of a millimeter. I just barely act on it. So I think I'm pretty accurate with that right now. So that's my float. So I'm not going to use the old needle, the old seat, the old gasket. So that's it for inside this bowl. We are going to reuse this gasket when we put it together. We're not going to do that yet because I've got to put some stuff on the bottom. So working our way up the carburetor, now we have to do the idle speed screw and the air mixture screw. Here are the old ones. And the kit comes with new ones, so we are going to use the new ones. So it comes with a new idle speed screw and spring. Goes here. This is a thumb turn. Air mixture screw. This has the idle speed has a knurled that you can thumb turn. The air mixture is a blade screw only. It goes down here under the choke, and you turn that with a blade screwdriver, one that is smaller than this one. I will have to get a different one. Air mixture screw, we're going to go essentially all the way in, and then we'll go half. That's one whole turn and eighth-ish. This can go in a long way, and you end up seeing it protrude inside, and it can go way in. I don't know if you can see that. It will thread way in, and actually the main piston has a cutout that when it slides in will go around that. So there is no stop point. So, but this is idle speed screw. So we're going to back it out till we sort of just see it poking through inside the barrel there. That's where we're going to leave it till we fidget with it. So that is our two screws done. Now we need to, so we're going to get rid of these, 1 and 2, and put them away. Now we need to do our main piston. So we're going to put a new main needle jet. We got a new main needle. It comes with a new little circlip. And there are a bunch of places that circlip could be. If you look at the old one, it's in the topmost slot. So that is where we will put it, assuming my vision is good enough to pull that off. I'm going to maybe use a pair of needle nose pliers to try to get that all the way on. This is at the point at which I send it flying across the room, and then I have to revert to the old one because I won't be able to get this done right. But there. Just needs a little pressure. So that little C-clip is snapped in the topmost point. It drops into the piston. There. Great. This is a guide line that rides inside a little protruding bump to keep the rotation in the carburetor, keep it from rotating in the carburetor. And as I said, this cutout is where the idle speed screw could protrude into the venturi, and it won't interfere with this piston. The next thing is to keep this needle from moving is a little spring in the top. Boy, it's hard to see, isn't it? That just friction fits inside the top of the piston. I was provided a new one of those as well with the kit. So we've got a new needle, a new C-clip, and this new little retaining clip. We're going to push that in there. I'll show you what that looks like when it's pushed in. That's really it. Doesn't do that much. In fact, it doesn't really have much of a purchase. Now, what we are missing next is your throttle cable. Your throttle cable would go in and would hook into this slot as well and come hanging out the top. I don't have my throttle cable yet. I've got one coming. It should be here in a couple of days, so I will come back to that. But this drops in nice and smoothly. It has the plunger spring that goes on it. Then it has the cap, which goes on and threads on. That is it for the top half, and I will set up to do the bottom half, and then we'll join them together. All right, bottom half of the carburetor. So here is our casting upside down. So we have the fuel inlets. What we have is we have a fuel screen, sort of fuel filter assembly. We'll talk about that one. And then we have the selector switch to select fuel off, main part of the tank and reserve. It's only a 1 gallon tank. The idea that there's a reserve is almost comical to me. There is also a fuel drain to drain the float bowl. It's a drilled hole, a drilled screw with a hole, and it had a fiber washer. So we're going to talk about a few things. One, let's do this fuel filter portion first. This top cover is held on by a screw. This is a 4mm old pre-ISO thread pitch. Japanese, it's an old JIS, Japanese Industrial Standard thread pitch. This is a 4mm by 0.75 thread pitch. Interestingly, the other screws, the main case screws for the carburetor, are also that. They are 4mm by 0.75, so you will be frustrated. That is not a standard. You're not going to find those screws readily available. You can find the taps if you need to tap them, but you're not going to find the screws readily available. For those who remember the disassembly, I took this apart and I noted at the time that it's an odd coarse thread screw, and it was, and it's not right. Clearly somebody took it apart, lost the screw, just jammed something in there, and the soft metal of the case sort of roughly worked. I am going to put a 4mm by 0.7 screw in here. It doesn't hold any real pressure, any real tension. I have already, since the previous owner or somebody had put this big coarse thread screw, these threads were already a little bit mashed up. So I attempted to thread one of the 4 by 0.75 case screws in. It sort of went in, didn't really like it that much. I didn't want to damage these screws. They still work well. So I took a 4mm by 0.7 tap, and I just tapped these out. It's pretty soft metal. The first couple of threads felt fine anyway with a new screw, and then I just went farther in, threaded in very nicely, and so now I'm going to use a brand new stainless steel 4mm by 0.7 thread pitch screw to hold that on. It's a long explanation, so let's get going. Screen goes in first. It has a little tab to grab with pliers to pull it out. Screen goes in first. Next would be an O-ring. This is the old O-ring. We have in the kit a new O-ring that's going in there. All the way around. Good to go. Then we have this bowl. I have used a little tiny wire wheel and a Dremel to clean the inside of it. It actually has a nice bevel that will fit against that O-ring. It goes in nicely like that. Then I have my new screw that I'm using. And it's a little button head cap screw with a hex fixing point. Now there should be a gasket here because we don't want this to leak. The old coarse thread screw had some form of a fiber gasket that's fairly well adhered to it. Here is where I'm going to use one of these crazy O-rings that came with the kit that doesn't have a home. And I'm going to put that right there. And then I'm going to put my new screw in. And I think that will serve my purpose that I need here to keep this from leaking fuel. And I will find out very quickly if I am correct in my decision making when I put fuel in this. So there we go. Snug it up, squish those O-rings. Actually, that O-ring is squishing so much it's coming out around the head, so I've gone too much with this. Let me loosen that up, make sure that O-ring is nice. And then let me just snug it about there. We'll try that and see how that goes. Now, the next is our fuel selector between main part of the tank and reserve part of the tank. It's just a different lower pickup for the reserve part of the tank. So what you have is you have this rubber disc with a bunch of holes in it. There are 2 locating pins here that are raised, and there's nothing you can do. Those are fixed. You have 3 orifices, 3 holes. These are inlet, and then the middle one is the outlet that goes towards this fuel filter bowl. So this goes in any orientation. It's uniform around. Most of these holes will be blocked off. The locating pin hits on 2 of them. This one at 6 o'clock, this one at 12 o'clock, and this one at 9 o'clock are all blocked off. You only have the 3 openings for the inlet, and then the outlet. And the way it works is you have a sort of a kidney bean shaped passage in this platter. The platter rides on here. If you select with the kidney shape capturing the top two, you're going to let fuel in from the top fuel pipe, and then it will pass through and go towards the fuel filter bowl on the carburetor. If you switch it this way, you have the fuel from the lower inlet orifice. So then what they give you is a retaining ring with information on it, and it is on, reserve, and stop. Stop, I guess. So stop would be straight up and down, and this would go on here like this. So you know you have reserve. Reserve would be picking up the lower pipe. So the lower pipe on your carburetor would be the lower pipe on your fuel tank. And then if you go all the way over to on, it would be picking up the upper inlet pipe, and that would be the upper inlet pipe on your fuel tank. And it has positive stops, meaning there's a notch here around the top and a notch here on the bottom. You can't go past that point. You can't go past that point. You can wiggle it into the middle, which is reserve. That's it. So the last thing, which I have not put on yet, which we're going to do right now that you know how it works, is a little spring washer. And so that goes in between the plate and the selector to put tension on the plate and press it down against this rubber gasket. So selector goes on, spring washer, sort of wavy washer, goes on next. Getting my big fat hands in the way. Wavy washer goes on next. Doesn't make a darn bit of difference whether it's one way or another. Retaining ring with instructions. Welcome to my neighborhood. You're getting sirens right outside. Two little screws. And I'll point out all these are JIS screws. If you've got a JIS screwdriver, I recommend it. They seem to bite in just a touch better than a regular Phillips. Regular Phillips certainly will work in a pinch, but JIS is what is intended. So we're doing these all the way down, hand tight. So now I've got a nice tension. That is all the way on. That is reserve, according to the letters, and then that is stop. And that feels nice and smooth. Now, the last thing I have on this bottom bowl, well, there's the overflow tube. So there is sort of an overflow pipe in the bowl. If the fuel gets too high, it'll run over, sort of like a man-made pond. It'll run over and it'll drain out, and you put a pipe on this to drip it to the ground. The environmentalist would go nuts, although this gets 100 miles to the gallon, so how much are you going to complain? So the last thing is the drain, little drain screw. I'm going to reuse the fiber washer. I may have to change that out. I don't have another one with the kit. So we'll see if this leaks when we put it all together and put fuel on it. But it has a, I guess if you're going to put it up for the winter or whatnot, it comes with a drain so that you could drain the float bowl or maybe drain sediment or water or something out. I don't know. It's kind of handy. It'd be nice on a lot of stuff, but we're just going to snug that up. That is the float bowl drain. This is the overflow from this tube here inside, and that's it for the bottom half of the carburetor. So now, last step is to marry the carburetor together. Have bottom half, have top half, and we marry them together. The top half has the pin that holds the float. It has a little cutout in the bottom half, so there's only really one way you can orient this. Again, I'm reusing our gasket, like I said. You will see that as I said, the fuel in the bottom half comes in, goes through the filter screen, and comes up through this passage. There is a hole in this gasket for that. So this gasket is a one-way gasket, and then that passage is matched with a passage here. This is actually drilled in. It's diagonal drilled this way to get under the needle valve. So we're gonna set this in place where it goes. All the holes line up beautifully. We're gonna take the bottom half, match it up. That all looks great. And then we've got our 4 case screws which go in, which are also Phillips JIS. These are the 4mm by 0.75 old JIS thread pitch. Don't lose them. You will be mad at yourself if you do. These are in remarkably good condition, these screws. They're not stripped. The cross, sort of GIS cross in the top, is nice and crisp. I'm very pleased with it. This carburetor is very nice, except for that broken piece of the casting, and I really hope I can figure out a way to do it. I suppose I could build it up with like JB Weld or something and then sort of shave away, and that may be something that I explore. Again, we'll see how it runs when we get it all in. Into the motorcycle or onto the engine and see how it runs. So we're just gonna, remember that gasket's a rubber gasket. It's not fiber, so it will have a little compression. So these don't need to go down to any sort of extreme, just sort of nice and hand tight, and you're good to go. So that's it. There's our carburetor rebuilt. We have the manual choke. That's choked. That's not. That's fuel off. That's fuel on. So when you're riding, these two will, and it's warm, these two will basically touch each other. This is your throttle. And air inlet is a big rubber horn. Now, it had this screen friction fit in the front. I'm not putting that back. You know, there is a paper element air filter in front of the horn here. I'm going to rely on that being an air filter. I mean, this thing is, I guess, keeping gravel out. I don't know. This is a little bit bizarre. I've not seen this on a carburetor before. It's really damaged, and it wouldn't. I'm more worried about little bits of metal breaking off of it or vibrating off. The sealing surface between the carburetor and the intake manifold, and there is a very small intake manifold. Here it is. That is sealed not by a gasket, but by an O-ring. There is a nice indentation for an O-ring. Here's the old O-ring, dirty and gross. The kit came with a new O-ring. We will go new O-ring, intake manifold. As with everything Japanese, it fits like a camera, and a couple of nuts will go on there, and then that's complete. Ready to go on the bike. So we're gonna get this on the bike, and it's about ready to test fire this bike, its motor, and see how it does.